Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks. Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try and make your world a little weirder. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Niall. Kyle, I honestly, at this point in time, normally I'm supposed to talk about something that whatever. And all I really have in my mind right now is the fact that I just finished the Scott Pilgrim series on Netflix. And so that is the only thing that's in my brain at the moment.
Yeah. I'm happy for you.
It was very fun.
You know, here's the thing. Scott Pilgrim, and I don't know why I gravitate to things like this, but as far as I can tell, Scott Pilgrim is one of those things that generates just the stupidest discourse imaginable. People have really strong opinions about why Scott Pilgrim is like bad or whatever. And I've personally never understood it. Like, I don't know if you've encountered this, but I guess I should preface this by saying that I'm a longtime fan of the Scott Pilgrim comics, and I constantly see. Okay, you know how people will like do memes that are like, oh well, if your name is Kyle, then you drink Monster and punch drywall. Yeah, which like I don't think I've done one of those things.
I have seen you drink Mountain Dew before.
Well, I
can confirm that.
I drank Monster in high school.
Monster, yeah.
And I remember, I feel like I've even told this story on the podcast before, but I remember having like a mental breakdown one day in high school because I drank like 3 Monsters in one morning. And that was really fucking stupid of me. And I don't know why. I think I had stayed up all night and all that. Just really dumb, stupid ass teenager shit. But I've never punched drywall. That's just not something that I do. I have no plans to punch drywall. So I take a little bit, I don't know if I like that meme so much because I don't think it represents Kyle's as a whole. And
it is unfortunate that you got both that meme and South Park Kyle in your lifetime. Like that is like a lot for one name.
A lot of negative, like bullshit to force on me, But the point is, I see the same kind of memes where it's like, oh, well, abusive boyfriend starter pack. And it's like, you must enjoy Scott Pilgrim. And it's like, I don't know if the people who are like talking about how like Scott Pilgrim is a series that like encourages like, I don't know, toxic masculinity or whatever they want to call it. Like, have they read the series? Do they know what it's about?
I don't know. Like, there's a lot of discourse about it that I like. I like talking movies, but I haven't ever looked at a long conversation of discourse about
it's not
Scott
worth
Pilgrim and been like, oh, this was what I wanted to spend my time reading.
It's not worth it. It's just another one of those things that's like, I don't know, in the hot take factory. It's like a big. Yeah. But, look, that was just my little soapbox. That has very little to do with what we're talking about today. Now, you could kind of, well, yeah, we could kind of extrapolate from Scott Pilgrim the whole vegan psychic powers thing and maybe like relate that to this somehow. I'll let you go ahead and handle that if you'd like.
Has the military ever looked into vegan magical powers? I feel like they haven't. Like, we've looked into a lot of shit. I think like if we've spent a good amount of money on trying to craft a gay bomb, I
Right.
think that they also probably should have spent an equal amount of money trying to see if they could weaponize veganism.
Right. It's something like 90% of your brain is curds and whey, right? So like to access that.
Sure.
Well, that's
Yeah,
that's the joke in Scott Pilgrim. So no, I don't know if they've done veganism yet, but there is a good chance that our CIA handler, after listening to this episode, will be like, "Oh, damn it, we should have been doing that the whole time."
Yeah.
And take a note from our show here.
I'm trying to think of a fucking vegan MK Ultra pun, and I just can't.
That's okay.
Like, Satan Ultra doesn't work. I don't fucking.
It's a satanic project.
There we go. Satanic Panic. It's my vegan tag team.
Yeah. Now let me save you here a little bit because, believe it or not, we have emails.
Oh, really?
Did you see these?
I see some stuff come in, but I look, maybe I take the kayfabe of this show too seriously in the like I don't know things before they're told to me way.
I'm okay
that, like,
being the email guy. That's fine by me.
Yeah, like our whole show is based around me not knowing what the topic is and you not knowing what the topic is, whatever, when we're the listener. And so I treat emails the same way in that like they will be, you know, except for like when one comes in that's someone like cold calling us trying to get us to interview somebody and it sounds absolutely ludicrous. I read those sometimes, but listener emails I like to have translated through the dulcet tones of Kyle. So.
Yeah, well, we have returning listener emails. One that we are pretty well familiar with. So first of all, Weird John sent us an email. No subject. It just says yes. Now that is a reference, I believe, to our last episode. So if you want to know what that was an answer to, go ahead and listen to the previous episode 382.
I think because this episode is a part 2, if you don't get what that is, you probably should go back to the last episode.
Yeah,
because this will be picking up from that.
Yeah. Now, Weird John did also send another email that says, "Hey guys, replying to your comments about the weird alien experience I had. I wasn't under the influence of anything and haven't done anything harder than caffeine and alcohol for many, many years. Just had to defend my reputation to the faceless, nameless listeners out there. Also, your talk about planet collisions reminded me of a couple things. Niall, I used to also get quite a few random CGI apocalyptic videos suggested to me back when I had Instagram. It's a weird niche algorithm that we both somehow must have fallen into. But
hell yeah.
if you want to see a good representation of planets colliding, you guys should watch the movie Melancholia by Lars von Trier."
I have that movie on Amazon Prime to watch at some point because people have said it's really, really good, even though it's I believe it is incredibly depressing from what I've heard.
Yeah, well, so that's what Weird John says here is it's a trip and also good metaphorical depiction of depression. I'll warn you not to watch around your parents or anyone who isn't cool with seeing Kirsten Dunst nude. Which I would say more than most of the population is probably fine with both of those things. But your parents
it's really
might
when
not
you get into certain combinations of people, like, you know, I don't know if my parents would bristle at nudity as much if they were watching something by themselves as they would if I were in the room with them. But if your
innocent children were in the room, then there's a problem. But the email goes on. As for the documentary question you don't care about, I would be fascinated to see a mashup of Sir David Attenborough and Andrew Callahan do an in-depth Planet Earth-esque documentary about various conspiracy groups. I'm talking Bigfoot hunters, flat earthers, alien abductees, all described like they're some rare endangered species. Great show as always. Thanks, Weird John. So thank you, Weird John. I do like that idea. I definitely think that there's a lot of ripe fruits in the documentary world for those kinds of people.
We need to get some sort of, like, what do they call it? Like derealization or whatever. What's the thing where you describe something normal as if it's exotic by like being kind of vague about it and just literally describing it? Like, do you know about this? What have you heard of this?
No.
You heard of this?
What are you talking about?
There's
what
a
the
thing.
Fuck are you
There's a word for when someone is like, they could say, "Do you have a toaster?" And then instead they'll be like, "Yeah, there's a little machine that has an internal heat source that that will, like, the more specifically you describe something, the less someone will be able to catch on to what it is, because it's not how we think of things. I reference this far too much. I don't know why. This is a thing that just sticks into my brain, because I think, like, context is really weird, is like a thing that my brain gets hung up on. So whenever decontextualizing, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
for some reason, I thought you were thinking of like no, I thought you were thinking of the word glib, but it's not that either.
No.
I don't know.
This is a thing. But like, people talk about this when they're talking about, like, how will future archaeologists see things that if they were to excavate stuff from today, like, if you have no context for what this thing is, and just
I see
describing it literally, it makes you look at things differently by taking context out of it and looking at things in a more, like, literal sense.
I know what you're talking about. I don't know the term, but I actually have a really cool book that has, like, these full page illustrations. I'm not going to come up with a bunch of information about it off the top of my head, but I know it's called Museum of the Mysteries, which is like this archaeological sort of, like, they're doing that exact thing. But it's like people like 100 years in the future looking at stuff from like modern day.
It's called Motel of the Mysteries.
Motel of the
David
Mysteries.
Macaulay.
Yeah. That's the one. Yeah. That's really cool.
I picked it up on Kindle after you talked about it, and so I knew I had access to it. So
my God, I forgot.
The actual thing.
Yeah, well, that's what that made me think of. But yeah, that's cool. I don't know the term. Somebody email us the term. Anyway, and I
think I could listen to like 4 episodes ago where I probably referenced it again and find it, but oh well.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, we have one other email that I'd like to get to because it actually helps us get into our topic for today. So Dave emailed us again, which Dave, I believe, was brought up on one of our recent podcasts with first time email. They're talking about the underwater UFOs.
Oh yeah.
And they emailed us and it says Ingo Swann and Project Stargate. So they say, hey guys, just listen to that podcast on Ingo Swann. I was wondering, and I'm going to be able to answer some of these questions, by the way, Niles. So I got this. I got this. So I was wondering if you were going to get into the later stages of Project Stargate around the time that David Morehouse got involved. It's so crazy how all of these names in the circles of paranormal research always float around each other. I always wondered if they just went to the same parties together and simply decided to make the party a full-time grift together event. Now, to just briefly respond to that, I do have plans to get to David Morehouse, that era, and other people like that. Maybe I should just clarify, because I don't know how clear I was when I first did talked about this stuff last episode. But like, I'm here with this Ingo Swann story in a 2-parter, barely scratching the surface of this realm of research and all the people involved, and I'm going to tease that out. I kind of thought to myself, like, I'm pretty focused on this right now. I can't guarantee it's going to be every episode moving forward for like however long, but I do kind of anticipate like a psychic winter, like we're coming up on December, and it's like,
I like the concept of a psychic winter.
Yeah, this is where I'm at mentally. So
we've always threatened to do a JFK month, so I think true. Like we can do a theme month here of with doing some psychic
I'm
episodes.
Deep in it. Like, I have probably close to 100 different websites, all bookmarked and like organized into different folders with different names, all under the banner of Project Stargate and remote viewing. So that is my part. That is my plan. There's a lot of stuff that I want to get to. The email goes on and says, I'm interested in hearing more. Hopefully there will be some things that I hadn't heard of before. I'm not sure about the interactions between many of these guys, but I was always intrigued and entertained by James Randi's debunking of these phenomena, and I'm wondering if you're going to get into Randi's jabs at Uri Geller and Ingo Swann. I loved James Randi's work. Penn and Teller also have a lot to say on these subjects. Just a brief response to that. Yes, we're going to talk about Uri Geller and Randi. That will happen. David Morehouse.
I should go see if there's a Penn and Teller bullshit on these guys.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
I did really enjoy the episode that they did at the like UFO convention that I watched for. whatever that was.
That would be a cool thing to watch if that is a thing that you find. I would definitely be down because so much of I almost said psychoanalysis. So much of parapsychology gets attacked by magicians and people who practice sleight of hand and it goes all the way back to fucking Houdini and such. Like it's like, I don't know, they're like kind of offended that people are trying to pass off this stuff as like authentic psychic ability. They're like, no, we know how this works. Stop trying to dupe people. Not, at least not in that way,
Yeah, you can only dupe people if you have a little ball under one of three cups on the street corner.
Yeah.
That's the only way you can dupe someone as a magician, not with this fucking
seriously
parapsychology bullshit.
Yeah, these fucking cards with symbols on them. Get the fuck out of here. So the email goes on to say, David Morehouse was recently on the Danny Jones podcast, and on it he got into how odd the environment in the lab was, how on his first day there were people reading tarot cards to each other and shit. Might be worth a listen as it dovetails nicely with the subject matter. It really kind of gets my blood boiling that we were paying psychics $500,000 per annum to conduct bullshit research, and all these years later we still don't have universal health care. Food deserts are commonplace and people can't find a shelter to live in, but I digress. Now you're preaching to the choir here, Dave.
Yeah, like I wish $500,000 was all the military was wasting on stupid bullshit. But boy, we're with you.
This is also like $500,000 per psychic person being
per year.
Yeah, and that's like not even getting into like the main researchers and like what kind of money went in through the military and whatever. But,
massive waste of money,
huge waste, huge waste. The email goes on to say, I used a rotary phone when I was a kid. Cheers, Dave. Not much else to say. I'm glad to listen, and every time a new pod comes out. Thanks for all your work. Hopefully one day you will do the USO pod, but it's whatever one day maybe when the content well gets a little dry, you'll consider it. Keep up the good work. The dry humor is a nice break from all of the bro jokes on most of these pods. I work in a factory, so I pretty much just listen to audiobooks and pods all day. Productions like yours really help me get through my day sometimes, and I want you to know that the fans appreciate it. Peace out, fellas. Dave, thank you very much. I've actually seen that. I guess it makes sense when you work in a factory or whatever, like that you would want, like, so there's a lot. Let me put it this way. One of our big demographics is factory workers.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's like, I've seen people talk about it and like mention that they work on a line or whatever. Or warehouses is a big one. And I can see that. I had this further corroborated by the fact that on one of my personal favorite podcasts, which they don't need the promotion, but I'm going to do it anyways. Tim Heidecker's Office Hours, like I would say a significant percentage of the people who call in are working in some sort of warehouse or factory. So it's a good spot to listen to podcasts, I guess.
Podcasts for the people.
Exactly.
Not for the
yes.
Rich assholes. I
exactly.
Guess.
We're the world's first proletariat podcast.
The only one.
Yeah, the only one. Thank you very much. It's always nice to hear from people. And we will, I'm sure, get back to the UFO thing eventually. That'll happen. There's so much to do and so much time to do it in, I think.
I mean, I'm not planning on stopping anytime soon. So the well, I don't think will ever run dry.
No, I think we're good to go. So
the episodes will just get more and more granular. So
yes, and that has been the trend. Last week we discussed psychic and professional remote viewer Ingo Swann and the beginning of his work with the CIA-funded Project Stargate. Swann is one of a number of people involved with this project who would claim to have put up authentic results with remote viewing and psychokinesis. Now, I want to say up front, we're not going to have time to get into the debunking stuff. But what was mentioned in that email, James Randi and Uri Geller, when I get into that, that's when we'll talk about how people are able to debunk folks in this, line of quote unquote work. So not in this episode though. We're going to just kind of learn Swann's story here, finish up his story. So We also discussed the weird connections between Scientology and this remote viewing project. So that's also very strange, and I kind of am still teasing that out for myself because I keep picking up little tidbits about it whenever I look in a different spot for research, and it's very weird. And there's one lead that's especially strange that we'll briefly mention on this episode, but again, will be its own topic. So it's the early 1970s, and all this research into psychic phenomena is being conducted at the Stanford Research Institute. I'd like it to make it clear here that this research was being passed around in various scientific journals since it began in 1972, but the fact that it had CIA backing was not public at the time. There is some talk online that like it was sort of commonly known around the offices of SRI that the CIA was giving them money, but I can't like confirm that it was like a known thing by people there outside of the project. Now, in our last episode, we left off with Ingo Swann's so-called vision or prediction, if you want, of the rings of Jupiter, in which Swann was prompted to use his psychic abilities to remotely view the planet Jupiter. And there he claims to have seen...
Did he get more stupider?
Yeah. They brought him back, and he was kind of like, they then, put a high school math test in front of him, and he scored slightly lower than before. So they did mark him as more stupider after that.
Every time you remote view, you lose like half a letter.
Yeah. It's so
your SATs go down by like 50 points.
Yeah, it's like it's the parapsychological equivalent of like the anime character who unsheaths a sword, but every time he uses the sword, it takes a year off his life.
Yeah.
So it was on Jupiter where he claims to have seen, a mountainous range and these crystals in a ring-like formation. And then the story goes that years later, Voyager 1 was sent out to capture images of Jupiter. And then these images would seem to, I guess, confirm the existence of these rings. And this marks Swann in the minds of many believers as legitimate. Now, this is one of the main things that these believers will point to as a case for why he's the real deal. But I want to take a very brief detour here to mention something interesting about the early days of psychic research at the Stanford Research Institute and the sort of academic quality of the stuff that they're doing. So the same year that Ingo Swann was brought onto the project by his Scientology bro, Harold Puthoff, and also joined by another Scientologist by the name of Pat Price, that's the cop who was brought in. There were a few other psychics brought onto the project for testing. There's a number of different people here, but the one that I want to briefly mention here is Uri Geller. Now, for those who don't know, Geller is the infamous Israeli psychic spoonbender. He's also notorious for being pretty widely debunked and exposed as a fraud. In fact, I think it was live on Johnny Carson that maybe it was even... I'm not remembering who it was. It might have been Randy, who I mentioned in the email just a moment ago, basically showed how Uri Geller would do some of his tricks. And I found that there's also some pretty good evidence that he has some ties to the Israeli intelligence operations of Mossad,
really?
Which is, yep. I mean, he's connected to the CIA as well, so it should not surprise most people listening to this podcast, the connections between the two.
God, I wish that there was like one of these things that didn't just lead back to fucking like the CIA.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like an NSA, like any of those organizations. It's like, I wish that that one reveal would be as fun as it could be. But it's always just, nope. Some shady project that they would rather you not know about.
Yeah, they've done a bunch of bullshit, it turns out. I don't know if you've heard about this, but the CIA has done like a bunch of bullshit.
Oh, really? Can you tell me a couple things? No.
Just a bunch of stupid shit. So Geller wasn't famous at the time that he worked on this CIA-funded project, but it would later come out in declassified documents that he was in fact tested by researchers at SRI, And by the time these documents were declassified, he was a pretty famous infotainer, I guess you want to call him. That's a loose term.
Look, that really just makes me think of the where Fox News, while like in the court of law, had to say that no one actually believes that they do news, right, and their stuff is entertainment content only. And like people still try to look at Fox News as a viable business in any way, shape, or form. As a place to get information.
That's honestly very good, because Uri Geller is basically the Fox News of psychics. There's probably a couple psychics that are Fox News of psychics, but he is definitely one of them.
Who's the fucking oh god, I'm not gonna, I wish I could just have been able to pull this fucker's, who has the like bad comedy panel show that Gutfeld, is that his fucking name?
Gutfeld?
Do you not know
I don't know if I know this.
Oh my god, there's a show on Fox News. I don't know if it still exists, because I think it never got any ratings whatsoever, but it was like an attempt at like a right-wing comedy news show, like kind of Daily Show-ish, kind of John Oliver-ish. But it was terrible, and it was by a guy named Gutfeld, and that was the name of the show. And it looked like he took the font from the front of a Garfield comic and just put Gutfeld and an exclamation point and thought that was comedy. It like, go if you want to just cringe to the nth degree, go look up clips of Gutfeld. It's absolutely god awful, and he thinks he's funny, and it's atrocious.
I've seen this guy. But I don't know anything about the program Gutfeld. Wow, that's really something.
He strives to own the libs, and right. That's his main goal.
That's the main goal of a lot of conservatives these days. And I do. Do you think that Gutfeld was the reason liberals were shaking in their boots when they made the realization that the right is actually starting to get good at comedy?
Yes, the right is learning to meme. The left is terrified.
Yeah, that's good. So no, thank you for teaching me about Gutfeld. I really appreciate that. I
feel like I just did psychic damage to the world.
Yeah.
So let's get back into talking about psychiatry, not psychiatry, psychics. Jesus Christ!
If this episode and the last episode's any lesson, it's that you should be very careful about the psychic damage you deal to the world at large. So again, Uri Geller is a pretty blatantly fraudulent guy. He's claimed some truly bizarre stuff that I'm going to save, because he'll be a pretty funny topic of discussion when I end up doing an episode on him. I mainly wanted to mention his involvement here because Puthoff and his research partner, Russell Targ, were both solidly in the believer camp with Geller. Like, they thought he was authentic. There's a lot of reasons why he looks completely inauthentic even at this point. And their positive review of Geller would end up published in an article titled Information Transmission Under Conditions of Sensory Shielding. And this article was published in 1974 in the British weekly scientific journal Nature. Prior to its publication, it had been rejected by a number of times by other journals. And up front, the editor of Nature wrote a pretty long opinion piece on the inclusion of the article, which can be summarized with the following statement, quote, "Publishing in a scientific journal is not a process of receiving a seal of approval from the establishment." So the point is, I would take Puthoff and Targ's conclusions about Swann and probably psychic abilities as a whole with quite the grain of salt, especially since the whole Scientology angle, in my opinion, gives off some weird slush fund sort of vibes.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I should follow that statement up with I am joking, of course, since this is a comedy podcast. Yep. So yeah, Swann.
We take after Gutfeld. This is all comedy.
It's true. So Swann saw Jupiter or whatever. So and a little bit of editorializing here, but I would just say that many of the websites refer to this psychic view of Jupiter and like a prediction. I would probably call it a safe guess, since we were pretty familiar with the concept of rings around planets and things like that. So
Yeah.
Whatever.
They always like to leave out the context of what, like, oh, we didn't know Jupiter existed. Or, sure, but no, but like, yeah, it was, yeah. Anyway,
just let this tension build up about all the bullshit I'm telling you about, because eventually we will talk about why so much of this stuff is just flawed and incorrect.
Okay.
Just not in this episode. So it's going to be a multi-episode holdover. So yeah, Swann would, despite all that, consider these experiments his words, not mine, cure of his experimental doldrums. He claimed that after the viewing of Jupiter, the quote-unquote cold ridicule he had been receiving in his line of work had shifted in the opposite direction. He also has like a whole list of observations that he claimed to have gotten from the remote viewing session that are all supposedly quote-unquote confirmed by scientific analysis years or whatever after the fact. I didn't include that list here because, like so much of the other stuff, it's like, first of all, you have to keep in mind that he like makes a ton of like sweeping descriptions of what he's seeing. A lot of it's based on like what he's feeling. Basically, he says a bunch of stuff, and then like 6 out of the 60 things that he says get quote unquote confirmed. So, you know, it's not
the shotgun approach to fortune telling.
Yeah. Now,
remote viewing.
Remote viewing, exactly. Now, after these initial experiments at SRI, I found a couple interesting tidbits about what went down, but I don't have a ton of details. So, sadly, a lot of this information is in a book called Remote Viewers, The Secret History of America's Psychic Spies by Jim Schnabel. And I think I'm actually just going to order a copy of this book. It's like $6 for a used copy, but I couldn't find usually with these older books on this stuff, I can find like an archive somewhere or a PDF or whatever of books like this, but I couldn't find that at all with this book. And like in so many places, it was just like, you know, this book is currently unavailable and blah, blah, blah. You can't rent it out. And so for whatever reason, this was inaccessible. So I'll probably buy a copy. But it's in this book. It's sourced to this book a number of claims. So one of the claims is that in August of 1973, the CIA contract ran out. And when this happened, Swann reportedly left SRI angry, vowing to never return. I don't know what happened here. Presumably this is in the book somewhere, but I'm really not sure why they're saying he like basically stormed out of SRI after the CIA contract like finished. Because, and I'll bring this up later, Swann even claims that he didn't even know that the CIA was involved at all. He had no idea, is what he claims. But he says a lot of stuff.
So see that in my brain just says the CIA money was being used for like the nice coffee machine in the office.
Yeah. And
when the CIA contract got cut, they lost it. So he stormed out.
It does kind of make me feel that way. I mean, I don't know that for sure. And I can also say that his account of things, because I've read parts of his books, are very hard to believe. So
really,
yeah.
The guy that is able to remotely view Jupiter makes some bold, wild claims.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So after leaving, Swann would spend some time working for the American Society for Psychical Research back in New York, as well as the Maimonides Dream Laboratory, which was a research center established by a parapsychologist named Montague Ullman. Now, Ullman was, I guess, known for his experiments in a phenomenon that was called dream telepathy, in which subjects could communicate psychically with one another through dreams. Now, here's another weird blip on the radar of Swann's career during this time that I wish I knew more about. But I guess that at this time, he also worked with Bill Keeler, who was the then chairman of Phillips Petroleum. And reportedly, this work involved searching for oil deposits together. And
so he was like dowsing for oil using remote viewing?
I don't know. I wish I had some more information on this because I don't know if this oil hunt was conducted psychically or not. I would like to think it was.
What if it was just like his day job while he was doing psychic stuff on the side? It wasn't paying well.
That's,
the CIA stopped giving money, so he ran out of the gravy train stopped, so he had to do some like oil research.
I don't know. That is equally funny. I genuinely think though that it's as you described, that he was like tapping into psychic powers to try and discover oil. Like I think that's what it was. But I don't know for sure. So hopefully I'll get that book and I can clarify some of the stuff down the line.
Yeah, I want to know the process of remote viewing dowsing. I want to know that process.
Now, there was apparently a lot going on for Swann during the mid to late 70s and throughout the 80s. It's during this time that he says he would develop a strict methodology for remote viewing. Now, I'm not going to go too in depth on his methodologies and beliefs surrounding how psychic abilities function. It is a lot. It is a whole hell of a lot. If you really want to dig into this stuff, I suggest reading, like going through his book Penetration, or jumping onto the Wayback Machine to read his old blogs, or even best of all, bibliotecapleiades.net also has a whole section on Swann. So you can look there. They have copies of a lot of his texts, including, I think, like maybe the entire text of Penetration. So check that out if you want to know his like weird new agey esoteric beliefs about psychic powers. But
yeah,
it's
Penetration as a book title. Yeah. Sounds so much like a sketch group doing a sketch. Remember, do you know about when like Madonna did the sex picture book in like the late 80s or 90s?
Yeah.
It feels like some like sketch comedy troupe making a sketch about that, and the book's just called Penetration. Like, it's weird that the book is called Penetration and it's an actual like look into like metaphysics and parapsychology. Well, also through sex. Like, he does have sex and everything. But there's something strange about that being the title, and there's a mismatch for me there.
I don't want to psychologize, and I don't want to like read into anything, but I did watch a video that was, I guess, uploaded by the like Ingo Swann estate posthumously, like 5 months ago, talking about Ingo Swann. Mostly just like gasses him up and talks about how great he was. And it's like his friends being brought in, and Jacques Vallée is in it. It's like 20 minutes long. It's like a mini documentary, but not really, because it doesn't really tell you much. But one of the things that like gets said in the documentary is like they show off his artwork, and they show a lot of depictions of like chiseled, shirtless men. And one of the people in the documentary is just like, well, I don't know if this was something in his subconscious that he was trying to get out, some latent desire. But basically, they sort of imply that maybe he had repressed his homosexuality. I haven't.
Are we talking like Toms of Finland stuff here, or like what? He just is drawing like buff.
It's like dudes? It's like if what is it, Toms of Finland? It's like if that, but if instead of like leather daddy gear, they were like, casting metaphysical spells. Like it's.
I don't remember like naked men in the Ingo Swann art I saw.
I don't know if they're hung up or anything, but they do show, believe it or not, the staircase that you were referring to, where it goes up the museum staircase depicting his artwork. So I saw that.
That stuff's sick as hell.
Also watched a person give a talk in Baltimore about one of Swann's students. So his whole thing endures. But point being, I don't see this mentioned anywhere else, but it was really weird to see that video and have them sort of like subtly hint that he was like a maybe in the closet gay man. I have no fucking clue if that's the case. I'm not making that judgment, but that is like sort of implied in that video, and it's very weird. I I forget why I was bringing that up, but like, yeah.
Oh, the penetration book
right,
title.
penetration.
You
So
came
like
off
there
that.
is a whole thing. I haven't looked into his like writings on sexuality. But it is a thing, it is a topic that he was into. But I really don't know what his perspective on that is. Like I could like throw out some guesses based off of like your typical sort of new age sex things, you know, like what I'm talking about. But so I don't know whether penetration is meant to be some sort of like cheeky thing or what, but he did have a lot of like, apparently his book called, it's something about psychic sex, no joke. And he that's
I think
like
they had that book at the museum.
Yeah,
the psychic sex one.
That one is like the most rented book at the like collection where they keep all of his stuff. So he was known, I guess, for his relating psychic abilities and sex, and I don't know what that entails. Frankly, like I didn't read about it.
Maybe I'll have to go back and pick up a copy.
No, it might. And the thing is, like, it's probably the thing is psychic sex and like sex magic are like returning to the topic of sex magic. These are things that are maybe worth checking out again sometime, but like not in the scope of what I was doing here. So, just to give you a peek into why I'm not covering all the shit that he talks about in penetration and like all of his methodologies and how psychic abilities work, I just want to kind of help you understand, because first of all, I sort of got this impression that his explanations of psychic methodology, the words that he used and how he said things, it felt in a way that is difficult for me to describe, like it was drenched in Scientology speak.
Okay.
Just like, I don't know, think about the way Tom Cruise talks about movies. Like
he's the most enthusiastic person ever about them, but has never actually seen one and could describe it to you.
Sort of like that. Yeah, it has a similar sort of vibe, but then he also has this like thesaurus-y quality where he really it seems like he's trying to sort of hammer home how intelligent his insights are and how special the things that he's talking about are. And then beyond that, he just like, he defines tons of new terms and then redefines a bunch of pre-existing words. And like, he like makes references to like real philosophy. Like he says stuff about Aristotle, stuff that is like half wrong. And then, so basically, instead of doing the tedious task of running down the list of terms like biomind and mental information processing grids and meaning transducers, I'm going to skip it. Because look, this guy claims to be a psychic and he claims to have been able to project his consciousness remotely. That's all you really need to know. There might be an episode in the future where I can break down the remote viewing methodology, but to be completely honest, I just found reading this stuff boring / annoying.
Fair.
So Swann would return to SRI in the fall of 1974 as a consultant, despite his, I guess, reported disdain from when he left. And apparently his return was due to the promise of more funding and quote unquote creative freedom, although I don't know what that entailed. It makes me sort of think this is when he was able to, because like, he talks that it gets mentioned multiple times that like he would really inform the like way the psychic stuff, a lot of the certain experiments were handled. Like he would come up with like systems and things like that is how it sounded. So maybe that's what that means. But
he sets up the SOP documents for remote viewing and everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the month before his return, he had also gone to Czechoslovakia, and I believe he was accompanied by at least Puthoff here to present a paper at the first conference on psychotronic research, which, just to remind you, psychotronics is like the term that seems to be used in Europe, especially Eastern Europe, for the same phenomenon that Swann is talking about. Now, while I don't have the full paper, in fact, I don't know if the full paper's even been recovered. I do have his introduction from the proceedings at this talk. And it's interesting. Swann seemed to be there actually like as a noted representative of the Church of Scientology. And his paper was mostly about this topic. So it begins with him singing the praises of Hubbard, literally like dropping like how well Hubbard's books sold, and talking about Dianetics and Scientological inquiry. Now, here's a brief snippet from Swann's talk. He says, "It is not the purpose of this present paper to review the phenomenology Dianetics and Scientology have engendered in the sociological sense. Neither will an endeavor be made to view the subject from the viewpoint of critical appraisal. An assessment of Scientological techniques indicates with wide possibilities for pedagogical study. A review of the literature of the Scientological premises and methods indicate involvement with the problematic man, and which is a reference to Hubbard, and his view of himself as a conscious psychic entity attempting to correlate himself with physical constructs of matter, energy, space, and time." You can't just throw around the word physical in the middle of a story about psychic abilities. You just can't do it to me.
Sorry, I went into a fugue state there for a minute because the thought, did Ingo Swann ever watch and review the movie Battlefield Earth, just like shot into my brain. And I
hope
had
so.
to quickly, he died in 2013. So it's very possible that he saw it. And I now, if anyone wants to do some digging on if you can find any reference of Ingo Swann talking about the movie Battlefield Earth with John Travolta, I would be very
I'll be honest
in
with you.
that.
I would not be surprised if he did see that at some point in his life, because he was a pretty diehard. Although, like I said, eventually he stops talking about Scientology. But in the 70s,
I just have to hope the dates. I just have to hope the dates crossed over where he was still into Scientology when that movie came out.
I mean, did he stop being into Scientology, or did he just quietly maintain? But he goes on to say, "It is thus seen that the fundamentals of Scientological inquiry stand upon certain concepts of awareness and consciousness, as well as psychic appraisement of man within the physical universe. In this context, the premises and techniques of Scientology, as established by its founder L. Ron Hubbard, are seen in many aspects to have both valuable correlates in several fields of scientific inquiry, and also contain possible practical application within the context of emergent alternative future histories." So if there was any doubt about Scientology's influence on this era of parapsychological research, in particular Swann, but like I've pointed out, like multiple people involved with this stuff, there you go. Like this is him basically saying, like, we can apply Scientology to all of this. So, you know, throughout the 70s and the 80s, he's on and off with SRI's research, but also he's occasionally doing his own thing with other esoteric groups. In 1975, the SRI research gained funding from the U.S. Air Force, but it lost its funding from the CIA. One odd sidetrack that will, again, have to be its own episode is about Pat Price, who was the Scientologist police officer brought into the project. He had left in 1974, and shortly after that is when Swann came back. So Swann effectively replaced Pat Price. And then in 1975, Price was found dead. He had been working for the CIA at the time, and all I can really say right now, without giving things away, is that circumstances surrounding his death were mysterious. Targ and Puthoff both claimed to have attended the funeral and viewed his body, but no autopsy was performed. And so the case of Pat Price is odd, and I'm sorry for being vague, but it will definitely be the topic of another episode. So 1975 is also a year that is huge for Swann, because from what I can tell, this is also the year that he begins to take the UFO phenomenon seriously. In fact, so serious was the topic of UFOs for Swann that he has a significant amount of his autobiography dedicated to the topic. Now, this is under the guise of, like, well, a good chunk of his life at a certain period was involved with UFO stuff, if you take him at his word. But it does read to me like he eventually discovered ufology and started to take the subject seriously, just given all of his other sort of views on the nature of reality and stuff. So this all began with a fateful encounter with a highly secretive government agent who likely, according to Swann, belonged to an intelligence agency. This man would introduce himself to Swann as Mr. Axelrod.
Now, was this intelligence agency maybe located in the center of something?
We don't know who.
Okay.
He never explicitly states who it is. I get CIA vibes, but he never explicitly says. So this Axelrod agent would first contact Swann through the phone, inviting him to a meeting in Washington. Now, by the way, I just want to be clear. All of what I'm about to tell you is what Swann claims happened. This is his account. We have no way of backing up anything he says from here forward. Nobody else can come forward unless this person, Mr. Axelrod, comes forward and provides proof of his existence. Then we just have to take Swann at his word here. So
okay.
They contact Swann through the phone. They invite him to a meeting in Washington at the Natural History Museum. Swann's apprehensive at first, but eventually he agrees to meet. And when he gets there, he's met by two twin men who give off serious spook vibes. He describes them strangely. He says that they look like twins, but not proper twins. There's something off about them that he can't quite put his finger on.
So this guy is really not into fraternal twins. He wants identical only.
I don't think it's that. I think it's that they look I think the phrase that he actually uses is that they look like they were meant to be twins. There was intention behind their looking similar. It's very weird.
So they're almost artificial in some way.
He does when in his writing, it does almost sound like he's sort of suggesting that he thinks that they are artificial, maybe. Or lab grown people. I don't really know. He never says that, but he gives some hints about what he thinks. So these twins escort him to a car. They put a hood over his head and drive him to an undisclosed location. And there is where he meets Axelrod, who Swann describes as a kindly-looking man dressed in a dark green jumpsuit. Now, the details of this encounter with Mr. Axelrod are fucking weird. And a lot of it is conversation between Swann and Axelrod, with Axelrod bringing up a lot of esoteric concepts and Swann explaining back and forth his grand and vital theories about reality and consciousness. So here's a little in media res snippet of his conversation to give you an idea of what it's like to read. I just want you to get the feel of what this text is like. So it starts with Swann talking, and he says, if there is a group mind, there possibly could be a species-wide one, having some kind of memory, which individuals could link into. Axelrod interrupted. Are you speaking about some kind of Akashic record or something like that? He now did seem nervous. And then Swann says, no, not exactly. Some kind of species memory storage, maybe at the DNA molecular level. I know this idea makes scientists throw up, but so does any aspect of psi. I paused to see if this passed inspection by Mr. Axelrod. He was very quiet, and so I couldn't tell. But finally he said, continue. There's been a lot of interest as to why the coordinate thing should work, which this is the line of inquiry that Axelrod is taking, is why do the coordinates work for remote viewing? Why is that so effective? Swann goes on to say, I've discussed it with Dr. Jacques Vallée, the famous ufologist, along the lines of information theory. Certain theories regarding information hold that it exists everywhere as sort of a cosmic thing. And if one had an address for it, one could link to it, like a computer that can find information if there's a correct address for it. Are you suggesting, Axelrod asked, that the mind is a computer that can link into... And then Swann interrupts, well, something like that, but not at the intellectual level. There actually must be lots of mind layers that function differently. But why should coordinates function? Axelrod mused, almost to himself. Swann says, well, in a cosmic sense, if one has a round hall or a planet, and if one wants to divide it up, one will assign what amount to longitudes and latitudes. These will divide the ball into segments. If intelligence exists as a universal, then this would be the best universal way to divide up a planet so as to know where one is on it. There's a matter of triangulation. Is this not how illegal radios are found by sending out 2 or 3 cars with antenna that can get a triangulated fix? I saw this in a World War II movie. Universal? Axelrod asked. Now, a hot magnetic thing seemed to come out of him. Why did you use that word? Well, why not, I thought. And Swann says, well, the best evidence we have for telepathy, for example, is that it seems to be universal to our species. People experience it regardless of their different cultures, their different backgrounds. If we assume that intelligence can be universal, we also have to assume that intelligence also has to have sensing factors that also are universal.
I don't think that quite like he basically is like if intelligence exists, so must like psychic abilities. And I don't think I would go that far.
No. And this is really, I wanted to illustrate how like pulp sci-fi adventure novel his writing is, like the way the dialogue is, like the fact that he's presenting this dialogue in an autobiography makes me go, wow, you sure remember precisely what was said between you and Axelrod. Like, it's amazing the level of detail you can recall about your discussions.
Well, he was able to access his genetic memory of everything that's ever existed to get the conversation perfect.
That is exactly right, because the way he views psychic abilities, he sort of suggests that consciousness is eternal and universal, and therefore, in the right state of mind, you can access consciousness at any point in time and space. Hence the ability to like predict the future, like why there are psychics who can do that and things like that. So he actually does see it that way.
Okay.
And that's about as detailed as I'm going to get as like with his whole takedown of how psychic abilities work. Because again, it's a lot.
Yeah, I have to say, I love when I make a joke and then you go, no, that's actually you're ahead of me. That's where this
that's what he's saying.
What he says next. Like next in my notes is exactly the joke you just made, but said seriously. I love when that happens because it just means it makes me feel like I'm like at least on the right wavelength for these people to like understand what's going on. So I think I'm in tune with this bullshit right now. I'm swimming in the right ocean.
I would agree. I think you definitely are. And yeah, his writing, it's just very fantastical and sensational. So that is when Axelrod professes interest in checking out the moon using Swann's abilities. And so they do, having Swann conduct his viewing much in the same manner as the Jupiter viewing, and they specifically have him target the dark side of the moon with his abilities. Now, Swann claims to have seen many things on the dark side of the moon, namely towers of light, skyscraper-sized buildings, and a sense of atmosphere. Part of what's going on with these remote viewings is you also get like senses of like a feeling. The way it gets kind of described by a lot of people is it comes to you in different like layers almost or waves of like sense. So like you get image, you get a concept, you get a feeling. And so, yeah, that's the kind of stuff he's seeing on the dark side of the moon. And then Axelrod all but tells Swann that extraterrestrials are living on the dark side of the moon, and Swann has kind of like tapped into that with his remote viewing. And this is, again, where a really dramatic sequence plays out where Swann is like practically reaching over the table and like pulling Axelrod up by his collar and yelling at him like, damn it, I want answers, like type stuff. And this whole sequence ultimately teases out this idea that the moon ETs are not friendly to Earth, and they somehow are able to exert control over the spook organization's investigation into them, hence the use of psychic powers to spy.
Okay. I feel like I've come across a like the like next people that would reference this as a source for their version of this conspiracy theory. Yeah. I feel like I've met the son of this conspiracy theory in stuff I've read in like Hoagland and stuff, because he the crystalline structures on the moon thing is a big thing in that world of NASA's hiding the truth about space from you.
Hoagland is,
and yeah,
those people are just, they're not fucking originals. This is one of the guys that I think a lot of people reference or are inspired by to talk about this kind of stuff. So that is like another big revelation for him. Now Swann, according to him, knows of the existence of extraterrestrials that are unfriendly. And this moon business with Swann goes everywhere you might expect it to. There's Soviet spies trying to fight for information about the humanoids on the moon, which, by the way, they are humanoids. NASA is sort of involved in the conspiracy. And of course, psychics are Earth's last defense against the aliens and some sort of force that he refers to as the bio-androids, which I think might be what he calls the humanoids on the moon.
Yeah. Do you think that, okay, so bio-androids I think has come up for me in some other research, and it almost sounds like, going back to the twins thing, it would almost fit the like kind of slight uncanny valleyness of the twins.
Yeah.
That he was saying. I'm curious if there's some connection. Anyway.
I don't know if he explicitly says, because I didn't read everything in his book. I don't know if he explicitly makes that connection, but like the twins are working for Axelrod, who is trying to spy on the aliens on the moon with psychic powers.
Okay.
So maybe they're defectors if they are bio-androids or whatever the fuck. It's so over the top.
I'm really trying to like flesh out the world here, I think, and it just is. It's just look, there's too much.
I agree. Now, after this wild info dump, Swann would be contacted again by Mr. Axelrod, who somehow manages to break into the locked up SRI facility. And like he talks about like Swann like sees Axelrod like duck into a bathroom. And so he follows him in there, and Axelrod's like, "Hey, do you want to get away for the weekend?" And Swann's like, "Yeah." And so they set out on this trip. He gets spirited away on another supernatural adventure with this spook character. And this is when Axelrod asks Swann if he's ever seen a UFO. And Swann basically says, "I think I did. I saw like a weird light that I shot like directly up. But I don't know what it was, but it was essentially, so that is a UFO, right?"
Yeah.
So he doesn't know what it was. He just saw a strange light that moved strangely. Now he describes this in a bit more detail, and the answer that he gives seems to be sufficient enough for Axelrod. So Axelrod tells Swann that they may have a chance to see a flying saucer up close and personal. So Swann, Axelrod, and the strange twins fly to some undisclosed location on the West Coast, which Swann speculates as being the Alaskan wilderness. And they land deep in this wilderness in an area that seemed to be prepared for their arrival because there's a van parked nearby ready for them.
Jesus. Okay.
They climb into the van and drive deeper into the wilderness, and eventually Axelrod instructs Swann to be absolutely silent and to merely observe what they are about to witness. And then what happens next is an account that comes from Richard Dolan's book, UFOs and the National Security State. So here's what it says. They came to a small lake, and Axelrod said that as dawn approached, Swann would be able to see it through the pines. We now wait and hope we are lucky. Say nothing, do not make any noise. They detect heat, noise, motion like mad. Dawn arrived, and Swann saw a fog developing over the lake. This went on for 5 minutes until the fog developed a luminous neon blue color. Then, according to Swann, the color changed to an angry purple. Axelrod and one of the twins each placed a hand firmly on Swann's shoulders, while a network of purple, red, and yellow lightning bolts shot in all crazy directions through the cloud. Swann said he would have jumped if the two had not held him down. He saw an object almost transparent at first, but then solidly visible over the lake. It was triangular or diamond-shaped, growing in size. Swann, in terror and amazement, heard a strong wind moving past, rustling the pine trees so much that some cones and branches fell on them. The object then began to shoot out ruby-red laser-like beams as it continued to grow even more in size while maintaining its position on the lake. Very quietly, one of the twins said, "Shit, they're enveloping the area. They're going to spot us." As Swann later recalled the event, some of the red laser beams from the object were blasting pine trees, and he could hear low-frequency pulsations. Axelrod whispered to Swann that the beams were probably honing in on deer or other forest creatures as they sense biological body heat. "They're sure to hone in on us," he told Swann. Just then, one of the twins literally lifted and dragged Swann away, but not before Swann noticed the water of the lake surging upward, like a waterfall going upward as if being sucked into the machine. The four ran quickly and at great length, sustaining minor cuts and bruises. Eventually, they stopped, breathing hard, and waited for more than 30 minutes until one of the twins said all was clear. Axelrod then asked Swann whether he could sense anything from the craft. At this point, it's obvious why Swann was taken from his position and role at Stanford Research Institute and into this situation. It seemed that these government agents believed Swann could provide some detail about what was happening here and help the government with their research and interest in UFOs. Swann burst out laughing. "You're completely nuts, Axel. I have to be calm, cool, collected, and in good shape to sense anything." But Swann offered the insight that the craft was a drone of some kind, unmanned, controlled from somewhere else. Axelrod asked him what it was doing there, to which Swann replied, "Well, for Christ's sakes, it was thirsty. Taking on water, obviously. Someone somewhere needs water, so I suppose they just come and get it. You don't need to be a psychic to see that." Essentially, said Swann, they treated Earth as the neighborhood supermarket. Before taking Swann back, Axelrod said, "I shouldn't tell you, but our mission will be disbanded shortly and the work picked up by others because of strategic security reasons involved." "Others," said Swann, "who will not mix in with psychics, I take it." "You got it," Axelrod replied. Swann last saw Axelrod at the San Jose airport and never heard from him again.
All right.
The UFO is taking a big Alaskan lake sippy.
It's just turning. Look, it comes down for a big gulp now and then goes on its merry way.
Alaskan lakes are the intergalactic equivalent of the big gulp that you pick up before you go and see the big premiere of the intergalactic Netflix movie in theaters.
Yeah, they do short theatrical
do.
that like no matter how successful it is, they only keep it in for like a week and a half so that they can make it considered for awards, but not, run the risk of devaluing Netflix.
Yeah.
So I saw Glass Onion in theaters and I wish that it stayed in theaters for like a month and a half, but it stayed in literally for a week and a half. And then they were like, yeah, we don't care about theatrical. That was all just so it can do awards, and pulled it out. And like, I
still haven't seen that movie actually.
It's fun. It's a good time.
Check it out. This would be where Swann and Axelrod part ways. And this experience, I guess, would change Swann forever, as you can find lots of speculation about aliens, UFOs, the moon, and other similar topics in his writings. So that's his brief foray into some sort of UFO spook operation.
All right.
So now in the late 1970s and early 80s, the CIA and military exploration of remote viewing and psychic powers officially had a code name. And this code name was Gondola Wish. Now, if you listen to the original episode on Stargate, this name would change over the years as a means of preserving secrecy, eventually getting declassified in 1995 while under the name Stargate. And this is where the name would stick, right? So that was actually the last name the project ever had.
Operation Gondola Wish is like, I don't even know what that would be referencing. It just word soup.
There's another one. The other one that like, there's something about how when it was called Grill Flame, one of the presidents accidentally leaked its existence. And there's a whole thing with that. And so, they would change the name periodically to, I guess, keep it secret. Like, there's no way to connect any of the names together, right? Like, not really. Yeah. So I guess that's the idea.
And they can say, oh, that project was discontinued, and in reality, they just renamed it.
Yeah. So throughout the 80s, Swann continued work with his colleagues at SRI, and it was in 1983 that Swann had another big damn year. It was then that all his research, testing, and training had, I guess, supposedly coalesced into a big breakthrough. So one of Swann's students, Ed Dame, who is a former military officer, says this. Or it's from text, one of his the things that Ed Dame wrote. In 1983, Ingo Swann, under the direction of Dr. Harold Puthoff at SRI, realized a breakthrough. He developed an accurate model of how the collective unconscious communicates information to conscious awareness. Swann believed that the ability to remote view, like language, is an innate faculty, a birthright, but must be learned to be effective. Swann's model provided a rigid set of instructions which theoretically allowed anyone to actually be trained to produce accurate, detailed target data. To test the model, the Army sent Major Ed Dames and 5 others to Swann as a prototype trainee group. So this group was the operational unit known as Center Lane, a group of 6 military officers put through a training program that was basically created and conducted by Swann. This was ostensibly to provide the military with psychic soldiers. Again, a topic that I think merits the dedication of its own episode. There is a whole subplot of these projects where they're trying to train soldiers to become psychics.
Isn't that like that's the men who stare at goats stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like that's
So that's a whole other thing that we'll get into eventually in another episode. But Swann would take on a number of students throughout the 80s and 90s, even outside of the secret projects of the military. Like he propagated his ideas. I think it's probably part of the reason why he's sort of like the reference point for remote viewing in the way like people talk about it online. In 1988, Swann would officially leave the program. In one of his texts, Swann states that he would never again work for or with intelligence agents for fear of his life. And Uri Geller has actually made similar statements, and he even goes so far as to claim that Puthoff never told him of the CIA's sponsorship of their experiments at SRI until 1995, after everything was disclosed. So in the late 80s and 90s, Swann would, I guess you could describe it as him solidifying himself as the premier psychic talent. He's publishing tons of books over the decades. He's passing along his learning and techniques, and he would do that clear up until 2013. In November of 1989, Ingo Swann launched this American Prophecy Project, where he basically said anybody who wants to can send in a prophecy to him. And here's what he said about it. Quote, "It is quite clear, to my mind at least, that humanity is missing an unparalleled opportunity by not undertaking organized efforts to constructively collect, evaluate, and benefit from the implications of forewarnings. It is possible to state that humanity probably suffers more than it needs to by refusing to recognize that the future can be and often is foreseen. It is patently clear that when the future is not foreseen and when people cannot foresee the real results of their own activities, the future and those activities can be, as they often are, responsible for terrible outcomes." So
he just wants to make a big tip line for prophecies that anyone can send in their thing, and we're all supposed to just comb over it, I guess, and try to be warned.
I guess so, because this was a project that he did from 1989 into December 1990. And during this year-long period, he would put out a newsletter that would be him just summarizing and analyzing all of the prophecies that were sent into him. And I guess that would end up being more than 80 of these prophecies. And he would then judge their specificity against media reports and see does it match up? And so he would then take these predictions and his analysis of them and publish them in the book Your Nostradamus Factor.
So he did this project for a year, crowdsourced a bunch of prophecies for him. He crowdsourced content and then released a book out.
Yeah.
He did this era's version of having people reply to his tweets with things and then just publishing the replies. Holy shit.
Yeah, he did the really funny thing where you basically bait people who are into the thing that you're talking about into basically writing your book for you.
Oh my God.
And he published it. And basically, my understanding of the rest of his life is he would give talks and make appearances at conferences. He would write. He had a blog where he published all kinds of stuff about psychic powers, but also UFOs. He would do this clear up until his death on January 31st, 2013. Now, this is essentially the end of Ingo Swann in a way. There's more, as always. I will be getting into more. So like we got to talk about the debunking side of things, because like this is Ingo Swann's perspective for the most part. There is, there's a decent amount of critical analysis of the experiments that were conducted at SRI while Ingo Swann was there, and Ingo Swann, how his experiments like worked. And there's just so many connecting characters and stories that I just want to put into their own episode. Ingo Swann is, I guess you could say, he has a legacy in the remote viewing community, which, like, if you go online, you can find true believers still talking about his stuff to this day. It's a bit harder to get some, because like his blog, so I forget the name of the website, but he had a blog where he published a lot of stuff, and he hosted a lot of his material on a website called, I think, like livingmoon.com. And if you look at that website, it might not be Living Moon. I'm trying to, oh, okay, right. It is Living Moon. So he used to have his stuff on a website called thelivingmoon.com. That is where a lot of his stuff was. I think some of it is still backed up on here, but some of it is missing, I've found. But if you go to thelivingmoon.com, you are greeted with a page titled Pegasus Research Consortium.
Okay. Is that some like shell company that he has incorporated to his house?
It's something, I don't think it's run by him, but it has a lot to do with John Lear.
Okay.
And it's, Bob Lazar is also a pretty big subject on there. John Lear is another guy who shows up in so many fucking things. He's heavily involved with UFOs. But he is also a former CIA guy. He used to work for the CIA. And for whatever reason, this website is now this Pegasus Research Consortium people. I don't know exactly who they are, but it does seem to be mostly focused on John Lear. But like I said, this used to be where you could find a lot of stuff that was written by Swann, but a lot of it's missing. And I think that this domain probably, my guess is that this domain lapsed after his death, and these people took it.
Yeah, because he probably had some followers already, so you can just scoop in and take over.
Yeah. So it seems that the owner of the website was somebody named Ron Schmidt, who I don't know who that is, but they seem to be have been very interested in these topics. So, could just be somebody taking, leaping on the available domain name. So anyways, that's Ingo Swann. I didn't get into a lot of aspects of his life, like the art side. I didn't do a ton. He has a lot of thoughts on that as well. But that's not really what we're here to talk about.
This would have to be like a fucking, yet again, like we say probably too often, this would have to be like a 6-parter to fully cover everything, most likely. So, you got to take it in chunks.
Yeah. Now, I would like to apologize for listeners at home in case you are hearing a cat meowing at me right now. I am currently being accosted by a cat who has, by the way, figured out how to open up my door.
Okay.
He's fine. I promise the cat's fine. He just really wants me to go, take him outside, which I'm not going to do because it's very cold. But he yells a lot when he doesn't get to go outside. Anyways, thank you for listening to the story of Ingo Swann. Didn't cover it all, but there's more to come in this branching off set of stories and characters from Project Stargate and remote viewing. So,
Yes.
Niall, are you ready for the big question?
Oh, so ready.
Okay. So you know how I talked about his like prophecy project thing?
I love it.
What prediction would you have submitted to the prophecy project back in 1989?
The first, maybe just because it happened so recently.
Can I make it slightly harder and say you can't say 9/11?
Oh, no, yeah, okay, sure. Then that doesn't change what I was going to say. I probably would have, put a prophecy for Henry Kissinger's death in the early 90s. I saw a thing today that they, some newspaper, I think it was like the Financial Times, maybe it's a magazine, whatever. Someone saw that the byline, someone who partially wrote Henry Kissinger's, whatever you call it, the thing in for his death announcement, whatever, was partially written by a guy that died in 1999. So like they've had this on file in some form since at least that point.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've seen a couple. There was like, I think Jacobin had an article that was just like literally like published the moment the news came out, that they had been sitting on for like, I don't know how long. So yeah, it's, everybody's been waiting for that old evil piece of shit to finally choke. Yeah. So, that is a good one. I mean, to be fair though, Niall, you could predict anybody's death because everybody.
Well, I was just going to say, like, I would have predicted that he would have died in the 90s, and I would have been very wrong.
Yeah, that's fair.
But like, I think that, I think I would have been able to prophesy, like, for some reason. The thing that comes to mind is I would have like prophesied the rise of Jackass. Like one day, there can be a group of self-flagellating, masochists,
pure masculine id. Yeah.
I like think that would be a fun one to try to like predict the rise of Jackass.
Of Jackass. Okay, all right. I
cowered it out at the last second from saying "Viva la Bam," which was the one that I watched more as a kid.
That would have been funnier,
yeah, I know, but like, there's so much less like baggage to talk about Jackass than to talk about fucking Viva la Bam.
I mean, look, you can. I think it's okay to poke fun at Viva la Bam and still say, I hope Bam finds some sincere help out there. Well, I wanted to send a prediction that will basically alienate the majority of our podcast audience. Okay. I'm gonna send a prediction for the rise of the phenomenon known as Skibbity Toilet.
How the fuck did like Source Movie Maker shit go viral with like I don't know, whatever generation it is, that when they're like 13 right now? How did that happen?
It's, I don't know. I don't know why this. I would wager a guess that TikTok is involved.
Yeah, probably. But
I really couldn't tell you what happened there. For those of you at home who are like going, "What the fuck is Skibbity Toilet?" I'm gonna actually make a proclamation that's kind of rare for me and say, don't Google it, because it's not worth your time. Yeah. Really, it will only serve to confuse you about our reality more. And at the same time, this all kind of makes me feel like that one Abe Simpson bit about used to know what it is, and now you no longer know what it is, and it'll happen to you, and blah, blah, blah. So maybe I'm just old, but the Skibbity Toilet stuff fascinates and baffles me greatly.
Here's my hot take, that maybe this is because I wasn't a fan of this other thing at the time either. Skibbity Toilet just seems like modern day YouTube poop to me. Like they're just the same thing.
Oh no, not even close.
No,
an artisan consumer, as somebody who's seen a lot of YouTube poop, there's no relation, there's no correlation, I think. But Skibbity Toilet is like a fucking weird narrative about a toilet man cryptid thing.
Yeah.
And I think like
but like crosses over with like all sorts of other like characters and stuff because it's just like a mishmash of everything in the way that
YouTube poop is, oh my God, I can't believe I'm saying this. I can't believe my voice is about to be recorded saying this. YouTube poop is like taking a particularly silly or cheesy thing from the 90s or whatever and like remixing it into something new, into like a different thing. Like it's not like crossover with different, like Skibbity Toilet's actually trying. I cannot believe I'm saying this. I feel like I should dunk my head in a fucking bucket full of ice cold water.
Go dunk
after
your head
this.
in a fucking Skibbity Toilet, my man.
Oh my God. I feel so dirty right now.
I love the times that I make you just like question your life on this podcast.
I know too much. I'm online every day. It's just a part of my life. It's a part of my work. I can't help but see these things. And now I'm putting this terrible burden on the listeners who don't know what I'm talking about. And for the people who do know what I'm talking about, you understand where I'm coming from, I hope. When I say that, I don't think I can say anything further on this without moving down another layer of hell when I die.
Yeah, you're about to take a leap into the the layers for like adulterers and people who over-explain niche internet content.
Yeah. Has anybody ever considered rewriting Dante's Inferno, but like doing it like modern style, sort of like a Ready Player One, where like, but it's in hell and like it's like at the lowest level. That's where you find like Skibbity Toilet and YouTube poop. And that's not even the lowest level. I could go lower, but I won't.
Is that just is the modern reinterpretation of Dante's Inferno just the Iceberg meme?
Ooh, that's true. It could very well be. That is the modern day Dante's Inferno, is the iceberg meme.
I'm just free associating at this point. I've lost all concept of thrust here. I'm free associating, guys.
I think
we got to wrap it up.
I think it's time to move on to some business.
All right.
Now.
So if you want to follow us on social media, because obviously it does so much good for everyone, we're on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers, from Google Play to Apple Podcasts to Spotify. If you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird, and we're probably there.
Twitch.tv/ItGetsWeird. I got back into it on Twitch. I was playing some Pokemon with some It Gets Weird listeners, so come and check it out. It's a fun time. Chat is popping off, and it's a good time. Email us at itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. Anything at this point. I mean, you heard the emails up front. They were good emails.
Yeah, we like to hear from people.
Honestly, just tell us about, maybe you had like a really good lunch recently. I love hearing about people's lunches. Let us know what you had for lunch. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We have a $2 tier and a $5 tier. At the $2 tier, you get access to It Gets Weird TV, where right now we are watching through season 2 of The X-Files. We discuss the show. We talk about other related and maybe not related topics and all kinds of stuff on that show. So you get that every other week at the $2 tier. At the $5 tier, you get It Gets Weird TV plus another bonus show in the off weeks. So you're getting bonus content every single week. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to the main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday. And you get access to the Discord where we're hanging out. You can talk to us directly. How that's such a fucking treat. Do it. Donate to the Patreon. And I would just like to take a moment to say, we don't advertise. We'll never stick an annoying ass fucking Blue Apron. You're never gonna hear that shit from us ever. So please if you can find it in your heart to give us some of your hard-earned, cold hard cash. We would appreciate it. We also have a $1 tier. You don't get anything out of the $1 tier. It's just you saying, hey, like your show, thanks for doing what you do. Here's $1. Here's a tip to my favorite paranormal, supernatural, conspiracy UFO podcast. If you can't donate, please tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird podcast.
All right, I think that will wrap us up for this week. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for continuing to support the show. Tell all of your friends all about It Gets Weird podcast. I've been Niall.
And I'm Kyle, and I'll skibbity see you later.
Goodbye. Good night.